I'd like to call to order the Gateway Board of School Directors Study Session Meeting, Tuesday, September 5th, 2017. This time, would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bonnie, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Byrne.
Present.
Mrs. Cerrucci. Here. Mr. Lapsevich. Here. Mr. Nola.
Here.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Here.
Mr. Ritter. Here. Mr. Stubenport.
Here.
Mrs. Warning.
Here.
Mr. Williams.
Here. We're going to go to comments from residents on agenda items. Because we have so many signed up to speak tonight, you will be limited to 2 minutes. And I beg you that if you don't have anything to add or you concur with the current speakers, please come up and just say, I concur. And if you have something to add, please add it. We'll start with April Hanahan. Please come up, state your name and address. You must be a resident of Monroeville or Pitcairn to speak.
Hi, my name is April Hanahan. I live at 110 Himalaya Drive in Monroeville. I want to apologize in advance. I'll be making a quick exit to go back to cheer practice. My daughter is a 7-year-old at University Park, and recently I was very disappointed to hear that a part-time solution is being offered for a full-time problem, which is the fact that we have a severe need for an equity director. So why are we looking to save $30,000 a year approximately by only hiring a part-time equity director? Do you not realize the long-term costs that our children and residents will be faced with if we do not handle the problematic achievement gap that our district currently has? It bothers me that this problem is not perceived as a problem by what I would consider the haves. This is perceived as a problem that applies to only our lower income and minority families. These people would be the have-nots, and this problem is a reality for them on a daily basis. First of all, we need to stand united. All of our students matter, and it's our job to do everything that we can to ensure that our students are given the opportunity to excel. Let's uncover what is causing this achievement gap and work to fix the problem. Let's stand united for our kids and our district. Second of all, if you are not of lower income or a minority, this is still your problem. If loving thy neighbor isn't enough reason for you to care, perhaps the following things will make you care. Number 1, continued decline of test scores. Number 2, increased dropout rate. These 2 things cause an overall decrease in property values. We are already not in the best position when people consider where to raise their children. Do you want that problem to get worse? And number 3, with an increasing achievement gap, increasing dropout rate will end up with a much higher crime rate and incarceration rates. Is this what we want for our students and our residents? Again, I stress that this problem affects all of us. Please do not suggest a part-time solution for a full-time problem. Please hire a full-time equity director for Gateway. Please do this to ensure increased success for our students, our district, and the wonderful community that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy Bear. Janet Beagle.
My name's Jeanette Beagle. I live at 105 Wiltshire Circle in Monroeville. I have 2 students currently at University Park and another one that will be joining them next year. I am disheartened that we weren't hiring a full-time equity director. Then I saw that there's a resolution on to hire a full-time equity director, but I also see that there's a resolution on now to approve the employment of a part-time equity coordinator. So I'm kind of confused at what exactly do we want to do here, because I, as a taxpayer, parent, resident, I want our achievement gap closed. I want people to move back to this community. I want my children to have a diverse education, and it needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Boyce.
Cheryl Boyce, Monroeville. I'm going to take this conversation a different way.
This summer's been an interesting summer, especially in relation to what's going on in Gateway. And let me tell you a little bit about what's happening across the state. There's a total flip in the philosophy behind what we should be spending our money on and what we should be doing. And I'm going to use an example, because I deal a lot with Harrisburg, and I listen closely to what everybody's doing, and we can learn from what everybody's doing. Philadelphia is hiring 22 social workers full-time. And I want to tell you why, as opposed to an equity director. I'm going to read this. The city plans reflects a growing focus nationally on student social and emotional growth and on factors outside of the classroom that keep students from being successful. Some of the initial 22 schools include those that have been designed as community schools, meaning they work in partnership with other organizations to provide services and programs and students for the families. Now, I'll try to do this really fast. Our Secretary of Ed, Rivera, was in Erie. They're going to become a community school because a lot of the problems that the kids are having that are performing badly happens out there. And we need to be able to get access to the programs out there. That's why they're doing a pilot program in Philadelphia. That's why they're doing this in Erie. Now, we're moving in the right direction, whether some people want to believe it or not. That hiring of the new homeschool and social worker, and you're dividing it based on the grade level, that's moving in the right direction. So this is a multifaceted thing. No one position is going to correct this problem. Social workers consider the need of the individual student. It is not a generic in-house program, because these districts have tried this stuff, folks. I listen to this conversation more than I want to when I'm in Harrisburg, and they talk about it over and over and over again. And they're all doing a pilot, and there's nothing wrong with Gateway moving in the direction they're moving with the idea that this is a pilot program, and in 1 year from today, just like Philadelphia, we go back and revisit this. Because what we may find out what we need is more social work hours, more home and school visit hours, because that's what these other districts are finding. That's what they're trying to do now, because they've tried everything else and it hasn't worked.
Thanks, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
Now, if I don't say your name right, don't crucify me. Jean Boyer. Bob Elms.
Bob Elms, 1303 Foxborough Drive. At this point, comment on Harrisburg is not always the place with Harrisburg is not always the place where solutions come from. The achievement gap has been recognized for decades. 3 years ago, the Pittsburgh Public Schools launched a 5-year plan to address this issue. 20 months ago, Gateway launched its Achievement Gap Committee to look at the issue within Gateway. Develop recommendations. This committee was composed of 6 educators, 2 doctorates, an attorney, librarian, 6 Monroeville residents, and 4 school board members. Committee recommendations are similar to the Pittsburgh Public School Plan, with a full-time equity director. Sorry. All this happened, the Gateway School District is still confused about what to do. I reviewed the official documents on the Gateway website from board docs. What's up there is a pattern that's disturbing. The recommendations of the Achievement Gap Committee are being ignored and sometimes misrepresented, and you need the documentation is all there. You need to check it out. On January 31st, the Achievement Gap Committee plan was presented to the public. Appended to the end of that plan was the administration's recommendation. In April, the Achievement Gap Committee plan was purportedly presented to the board. This was actually the administration's recommendations. It was turned down, and there was public outcry about what happened. On May 2nd, Chad presented the real Achievement Gap Committee presentation or recommendations. Before it ever made it to the board meeting, the voting meeting, that was taken off the agenda, and the administration's recommendations were put in its place. This was, again, met with community disturbed. The community was just upset about this. Chad Dead made a recommendation to hire, and this is May 2nd, 2017, to hire a full-time equity director at up to $125,000. Now, in August 15th, we were told that no equity director could be found. And I see an equity director on the list here. If that person had filed that application before the 15th, he should be offered a full-time position, because that full-time position was what was available. And you know what? A full-time director, equity is something that is pervasive. It's not one thing. It's a multiple, faceted thing. You had a report back in 2013 or so that talked about equity within the Gateway School District. It's culture within the school district. It's how rules are enforced. The rules may be perfectly fair, but are they enforced in equity? The only way you can see whether or not there's a problem is to look at data. And a social worker doesn't look at data. You need somebody there who knows how to look at the data, make judgments, make recommendations, and change things. Really, in all honesty, you need a full-time equity director who is knowledgeable in what he does, and you need to make a long-term commitment to this.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Eric Haberly. Jennifer Hayes.
My name is Jennifer Hayes, and I am a parent of 2 sons at Gateway Middle School, and I live on Regal Court. It actually gives me hope that since we have someone that you've recommended for a half-time position, I kind of feel hopeful that you may revise that to a full-time position by the end of this meeting, just like the vote in June, we voted for a full-time, and that didn't stick. So maybe this half-time position won't stick either. That's my hope. There is research about the achievement gap closing in some schools, in many schools, and that's the research that we looked at for 2 years. We are the most diverse district in Allegheny County out of 42 districts, but our staff does not reflect that diversity of Monroeville or of our students. Not our upper administration, not our principals, our school board, our teachers, our custodians, our maintenance crew, bus drivers, paraprofessionals. We counted about 20 African American employees out of 500 earlier today. And that's people from every building kind of saying, well, so roughly 20 out of 500. It's not a criticism. It's let's move forward and let's do better. And I expect better. My kids are here. We started this work when they were in 4th grade, and now they're in 8th grade. And if we start with elementary, again, they get nothing. They go through high school and they get nothing. They get nothing from all this work. And I moved here for this diversity. I moved here because one of my sons is African American and the other one is Guatemalan, and this is the perfect environment for us. And I'm really hopeful that you guys will step up and give this position full time. How is he going to train? How's he going to work with teachers? How's he going to work with students? How's he going to work with parents if he has a full-time job and a half-time job? What time? When will that happen? I just think we can do better. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Cynthia Hill.
Good evening. I am Cynthia Hill. And
Can we have your address, please?
yes, Holly Drive in Monroeville.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This we know for certain, that the empirical data clearly suggests that we have an achievement gap. It exists right here in our Gateway School District. And this we know for certain, that therefore there is absolutely disparity. It points to disparity. And so I trust that this board is truly concerned about such disparity. Because I believe that if this board truly finds it troubling, well, and disconcerting, that we do have an achievement gap in the district, that we would find it to be imperative, dare I trust, to vote unanimously that we stand in support of a position that requires a full-time equity director for the sake of each and every student in our district, that would certainly help us to acquire an ongoing academic proficiency. Now, I've got to believe that we would no more be content to put a Band-Aid on an infected, gashing wound. And I must believe that we would rather seek and implement the most operative approach for that wound's healing. And so I am beseeching you, each and every one of you, who have the power to make a responsible decision, to hire a full-time equity director who will have the capacity to better ensure that the achievement gap continues to narrow, and this equity director will be enabled to give full attention to this district's gaping wound of disparity. And as a result, I'm absolutely convinced that we can expect to have an improved, ongoing, sustainable, practical, and beneficial results for our students' academic standing in our Gateway School District. Thank you.
Anna Howard.
Lene Howard, 2162 Ramsey Road. I concur with a lot of what's been said tonight, so I'm not going to repeat it. I understand we're #1 in diversity in Allegheny County, but there's a lot of disparity within that diverse culture. Being #1 in diversity doesn't mean a whole lot if you're not doing a lot to educate and make equal the diverse population that you serve. Beyond a full-time equity director, a pilot program is just not acceptable for me. I know many of you on the board don't look like me, and your children don't look like my children. But for my children's sake, my children are at different buildings. I want them all to get the best education possible. And a pilot program for me is not the answer.
Thank you. David Howard. Brian Howard. Ken Houston.
Kenneth Houston, Edgemead Drive, Monroeville, PA, President of the Allegheny East NAACP. I concur with everything that was said here. I don't understand where you guys dropped the ball. Who went in the back room and made the decisions? I mean, Chad presented a pretty concrete idea. I don't know what you're scared of. What is the problem with diversity? I mean, this backroom, behind-the-scene deals that you guys continue to make, and your own school board colleagues talk about your lack of transparency. I have no doubts that Dr. Woods is qualified. I have no doubts. But to ask someone to come in to fulfill a commitment of that magnitude part-time is absolutely ridiculous. It speaks volumes to the lack of thought that's put into what needs to be done. Gateway is a wonderful school district. We have wonderful teachers. No one is disputing that. The NAACP doesn't challenge that. RAMP doesn't challenge that. No community organization doubts the work that the school district's teachers put forward. I have a 9-year-old son in this district. He loves his school. He loves his teachers. But you need a full-time equity director, not coordinator, not part-time contractor. You need a full-time equity director to help you move this district forward. There's nothing wrong with that, folks. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't understand how you came to the conclusion that you needed one, and then you do the 52 fake out and decide all of a sudden you don't need one. Who made that decision after you told the public that you was giving them a full-time equity director for $125,000 max, by the way? Now, I'm not the sharpest knife in the cutlery, but I know what I heard. And then to read this and say, what are we doing? We took 20 steps forward, and now we're taking 50 steps backwards. Folks, we need an equity director, full-time. Hire him. I don't have any doubts that you picked an excellent candidate. I don't like the lack of transparency in how you did it. I don't feel that Ms. Crump told me the truth, but I'll accept what you're doing. But just give us one. This isn't hard. Like, come on. Give us an equity director to do what we can do to make our school district better. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing. This doesn't have to be so divisive. Everything doesn't have to be pulling teeth. Come together, do what you are elected to do, and support your minority student population. And social workers don't cut it. I travel all over the country. Social workers are not the main component to helping a school district.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. April King.
My name is April King. I live at 4437 Helmore Drive. I have a question and a concern to share. My question first is that being that you did, initially approve a full-time equity director position and then went about the business of interviewing to see if you could find one. My understanding, you had interviewed several candidates, and one of them called me himself, and you had invited him to your last board meeting. Well, what was shared with me was that he, during that interview, was offered a part-time position. My understanding is while he was being interviewed for a full-time position. So my question is, how did we drop the full-time position for an equity director, and then at the last board meeting you came and said, but we have someone who's part-time, we can't find someone who's full-time? the amount that you had voted on for that salary was between 95 and 125,000. He said he would be willing to take that salary range, and yet you had said that you did not find a qualified full-time candidate. So I'm a little bit curious in knowing how it came to be that if you were looking for a full-time equity director and you found someone who came to interview full-time, how did that change to a part-time offering? That's number one. The second, my understanding is that your half-time equity director position is based on the idea that you would like for this to be a pilot school between two schools, and you feel that this is just not a big enough position. $75,000 of what you have recommended, whoever it was who proposed this at the last meeting, says it's for instructional coaching and tutoring, and it says all students, not teachers, but all students within CSE and Evergreen will be provided instructional coaching and tutoring. I'm wondering at what point does the equity director get involved with the students and work with the teachers? I also noticed that the other amounts for that cost of $135,000 were for the equity coordinator, a diversity consultant, and a CRP consultant, culturally responsive practices.
Hang on, April, something just went out. We just lost the microphone? What happened?
The microphone cuts off after 2 minutes.
Did she keep going?
Can we turn it on?
I can hear her.
So I noticed that there are all of those amounts, but I didn't see anywhere in your plan where you really get to the root of the problem of getting culturally responsive instruction professionally developed so that teachers can be trained on what to do within their classroom. I did hear someone talk about a social worker early on. They can work with a couple parents here or there, but I thought that we had discussed having an equity director to work with teachers on the research-based practice of culturally responsive practices within the classroom would multiply that one person's experience to every teacher in this district. 95 to 125,000 would allow that to happen. But $75,000 for instructional coaching, for tutoring, and for students only within two buildings isn't going to cut it. So I think that financially what makes sense is to hire someone who is going to be full-time, who can work with the teachers in every building, who can offer professional development, and whose time would be better spent full-time versus a full-time job plus a part-time job plus a family. Not sure how that happens.
Thank you, April. Or Sean Kennedy. Rick McIntyre.
Good evening, Rick McIntyre, 2262 Tilbrook Road. Again, most of what I was going to say kind of got already reiterated once or twice, so I think basically what I'm going to lay out to you right now, and if I can have just a little eye contact, is what you have in front of you now, it's a matter of choices, okay? You guys, and I applaud you for making the choice to recognize that there is an achievement gap going on in the Gateway School District, and you chose to make a committee to study it, to find the best solution for it. Now you have a choice between acting on what that committee actually found, or kind of throwing this part-time resolution that came out kind of around the bend, not sure where it came from. Again, it's all about choices. You know, I went to a school district that made choices, and they made a lot of poor choices. And you see them on the news almost weekly right now, 10, 15 years later, because of those poor choices. And I think we're standing at a crossroads here today. And it's about, are you going to choose to put all of your eggs in the basket and be committed and give a full commitment? I mean, if this guy's qualified to be full-time and he's willing to take, you know, towards the upper end of that salary, then pull the trigger. Let's make it happen. You know, I'm sure he's qualified. I'm a little bit nervous about him, and I think a lot of other people are, trying to work a full-time principal's job and, you know, address the achievement gap problem in Gateway. Starting to stutter. My main problem with the part-time position is I'm not a fan of just doing the 2 pilot schools. And from what I understand, one of the 2 schools isn't even the school that has the bigger gap. There was another elementary that possibly should have been thrown in there in place of that. So where the motivation comes from to name those 2 schools as the pilot, I have no idea, and it leads to questions. So again, it's about choices. You chose to spend, what was it, $35,000 to cut a hillside? And we're going to cut the $35,000, $40,000 away from the achievement gap. That's a choice. So again, you have a choice tonight to stand in front of the public and vote and do the right thing, and I have faith that you guys will. Thank you.
Thank you. Lorraine Curtis. Lorraine.
Lorraine Burke, Monroeville, here again. At our last meeting, I called it out. I told you about my Christianity, but I also used the word liar, and I used it strictly in the truth. Because in June, you passed the position of a full-time equity director. And then we came back in August. See how long it's been? All this stuff. We come back and you've changed it. And I employ you as being leaders in this community to set an example for our students and to bring our community together, not divide us. I employ you to tell the truth, not a lie, so that when our students sees these on the television, they see you for what you are. And that is, you're standing for what is right, which is best for all of us. And leave the politics out. I'm going to end now because I got 2 more people to read for. Thank you.
Dick Reed.
Dick Reed, Brightberry Road. Gateway School Board meeting. Members of the Gateway School Board, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be heard. I want to thank you for the countless hours you spend to do the best job you can for this district. I know it can, and at times seems thankless job, but I believe it is the most important job that the public elected official can do. As a former board member, I can relate to what it is you do. When I was on the board, we were faced with closing schools, teachers, and support services strikes. Senior citizens said, let them stay out. Don't give them money. Parents, both working, said, get them back. I want the classroom. You're costing us day by day money. I was supportive of a program called computer literacy. Some parents said, just because you have a computer background, we don't want our children to be cloned. When the program became teachers, or began teaching to be trained, now look how far we've come. People didn't want the computers back there. Look where we are now. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a chance to make a difference on young lives. You have the opportunity, and yes, a challenge to begin a program that can improve a segment the student body and subsequently raise the bar higher for Gateway. You have the opportunity to develop a program that can be a model for others to follow, but it cannot be accomplished with a half-hearted, part-time effort. That is why I urge you to consider ways to hire a full-time equity director. He's a Republican, by the way, and whatever your name you wish to call it. If you hire from the outside of the district, perhaps other offers, initials, 3-year contract, this is a review every year. If you hire from within, perhaps some guarantee if the program does not continue. That person, based on seniority and subject matter, can return to their former position. Any person you approve for this position must have regular accountability and establish objectives. This should not be a position that once established goes on forever without visible improvement. Parents must also be visible support of this program. Dear board members, and I'm reading this fast because of the 2 minutes. Dear board members, ask yourself, how do I want to be remembered when I no longer a Gateway School Board Director? Thank you for your considerations to my thoughts. Thank you so very much, Dick Reed.
Sam Sharma. Sharma, S-H-A-R-M-A. Lee Simons.
Lee Simon, Elmar Drive, Monroeville. My wife and I choose not to have a computer. Gateway School District students don't have that choice. The students must have access regardless of race or financial status to the electronic learning tools and tutoring that will equip them to enter institutions of advanced learning or enter the very competitive, I dare say brutal, job market. My wife graduated from Wilkinsburg High School and I from Penn Hills High School in 1964. The administration was white, the teachers white, the history, with few exceptions, white, books by white authors about white people. There were no racial issues for us, the overwhelming white majority of the student body. The demographics have dramatically changed in 50 years. The growing black minority, with the addition of the Hispanic and Asian minorities, may eclipse, I should say will eclipse, the white majority of the student body. The curriculum should be adjusted to these obvious changes, and especially to the needs of the larger black minority of students. Administrators and teachers should receive advanced training in the area of cultural accommodation. Changes should be made with sensitivity to and respect for the individual student. The message must be loud and clear: you do matter. It has been long accepted by many people that black students lacking a positive paternal influence, lacking financial stability, and exposed to violence will be scholastic underachievers. But what of the black students who enjoy supportive, positive parenting, a decent level of affluence, and a relatively safe community, yet do not attain the same level of academic achievement of the white student majority? I do not have answers. It is crucial that answers be found. I am urging the school board members to vote for the appointment of a full-time equity director, a person with superb academic credentials, a person who has been intimately involved with the issue of achieving academic parity within the student body, a statistician, an administrator, but most importantly, a person with passion, compassion, and vision, who will elevate the desire for academic excellence in the black student body and proclaim, yes, you do matter.
Rabbi Barbara Simons.
With only 2 minutes, I'll just wait till everyone's here. With only 2 minutes, I still need to take some of that time to just express the pride in Gateway School. As our youngest son is a senior, what the school has done for all 3 of our kids has been a remarkable thing of how successful they are, how much they've grown to know who they are, with thanks to the administration and certainly the teachers and the support staff and so forth. So to start without saying thank you would just be wrong. So thank you. I am just overwhelmed with the amount of things that you need to look at in terms of how to educate our children. There are so many pieces to it. It is obviously not what textbooks are chosen and all of those kinds of things, and I try to express that fairly often whenever I am speaking to any of the administration, and Mr. Short is nodding his head, having heard that from me before. It really is remarkable to me. The Jewish community values education, as does any of our religious communities, of course, but I can speak for ours. Education leads to open doors and what we might call the American dream. You voted with courage to make a change. There is a difference in being part-time and full-time. And I know that from somebody who works, I don't know, at least 70 hours a week, that I could not do what I do for the community as well as for my own synagogue and the interfaith community had I not had the time and wherewithal to look around the entirety of the community. This idea of social worker sort of versus equity director piece, I don't have enough information to speak of, except that I wonder about the question of how much is about we're putting on what happens at home versus how much what happens in the classroom. Because ultimately what you have more power about is what happens in the classroom than what happens at home. And I have to say, one of my many heroes at Gateway and the Gateway School District is Michelle Major, who I work closely with on various initiatives, who is the school social worker, does remarkable work. But this is not her job. It's not within her realm. Dr. Philip Woods, who I just pointed out to, I wish him deep luck in this job, hoping he's able to get it, but hoping it becomes full-time. I'm afraid that we might be setting him up and therefore us up for failure, because we know if we have a full-time job and only part-time time, we can't actually get done what we intended to get done. I'm asking you to go back to what you looked at a couple months ago and look at not the short term, but rather look at the long-term investment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Those doors,
It-
doors 27 are locked.
If I could just thank Rabbi Simon. I know we've had many conversations over the years. And with that said, and you had mentioned your son being a senior. Yes, it's hard to believe. But the junior class, which is the cohort that is evaluated on this school performance profile, the scores have just been released. And one note of data that really came from the efforts of the staff and collectively the achievement gap, because we started this conversation probably close to 2 years ago. And it's the efforts that we've had on providing equity for all of our students in not only the pieces of literature, but throughout our curriculum. And I did want to note to the audience tonight that last year, or I should say 2 years ago with the 15-16 data, there was a 30% gap between white students and African American students in literature. This year's scores came in. Our Caucasian white students were proficient, meaning passed, at a near 86% rate, while our African American students came in at a near 81 to 82% rate. Phenomenal increases. And that's a testimony to everyone in this room and our teaching staff, because we know how talented of a group our staff is. Now, we still understand that there is a gap that exists throughout earlier grade levels. And our ultimate goal is to eliminate or alleviate that gap upon graduation. That is the goal. And if you look at that PA school performance profile, they systematically grade schools on their efforts in closing the achievement gap over a 6-year period in ELA, science, and math. I shared the data with our central office team today, and that data indicates that we are dark blue, meaning near a score of 100 for closing the achievement gap over that period of time. This is not fictional data. This is data derived from PDE, Pennsylvania Department of Education. By no means am I diminishing the work of anyone. This was a collective effort that we must continue to work on to deliver at all levels, K through 12, to eliminate the gap systemically. And that is our effort. And I did want to acknowledge that, so thank you.
Ellen Heiserstroh. Brittany Smith, are you speaking for Ellen?
I'm reading this for Ellen. She lives on Cabot Road. I regret that my work schedule prevents me from being here to speak in person. I write this letter as a property owner and a school tax-paying resident without children. Please follow through on your commitment to appoint a full-time equity director. This will be for the good of our young people and our community as a whole. We have been aware of this achievement gap for a long time. Experienced citizens have investigated and studied various approaches to address the situation. Now that we have a reasonable plan, it is time to implement it fully, and that means a full-time, not a part-time director. This situation deserves a director full-time attention, energy, and commitment. Please try harder to find a director. Please interview more of the applicants. The Times Express reports that we had 30 applicants and only 6 were interviewed. Please include more people in the interview process, including the residents who were involved in the forming of this plan, people from the African community who have personal experience with the situation. And both Kenneth Houston, the president of Allegheny East chapter of the NAACP, and Dr. April King, the president of RAMP, who did the research on the achievement gap. I am counting on you to do right. It will benefit all of us and all of you. Thank you for your time, Ellen. She is a non-African American speaking.
Brittany Smith.
Forgive me, but when I'm done, I have to make a quick exit. But Brittany Smith, Hazelwood Drive, Monroeville. I'm a 2004 graduate of Gateway High School and someone who has been privileged enough to have started and ended my entire K-12 education in Gateway School District. I'm here to speak to you about the hiring of a full-time equity director who is qualified to speak to the issues of diversity, equity, and how this district can do more for minority students and Black American students in particular who are falling behind in the achievement gap. To my knowledge, this board voted to hire a full-time equity director in June, only interviewed and searched for candidates for 2 weeks, then in August decided to no longer pursue a full-time equity director, stating that there were no qualified full-time candidates. I think that something as important as closing the achievement gap for students deserves a little more time and attention than interviewing people for 2 weeks, just so that you can say you tried and make it appear as if you put effort into something that this district so desperately needs, if it ever wants to be the district it once was. I was a student here when we had blue ribbon schools, one of the best districts in the area, and like my brother and sister, we were one of the only few Black students in AP classes. Mind you, at the time, there were not many Black students in the district, but that has clearly changed. However, what has not changed are the lack of Black students in AP classes, and unfortunately, there is now an even wider achievement gap between Black and white students. In this district and community have been aware of the needs to address this since 2007. It is 2017. Can you imagine what progress could have been made in 10 years if this was addressed when you first knew there was a problem? Do you think the Black students in this district are worth resuming your search for a qualified full-time equity director who can put in place best practices for the district, training for the teachers and administrators, and help foster an environment where Black students can excel and reach their full potential? If you think these students are worth it, then please immediately resume your search for a qualified full-time equity director. Because if you don't, you have just told an overwhelming number of students and their parents that you don't care about their kids, their futures, their achievements, and you will let them fall to the wayside. You're elected to do your job. Please do it and think about that. Thank you.
Tony Thompson.
Tony Thompson, Gulf Ridge Drive. Good evening, everyone. A couple years ago was the first time I attended a school board meeting, even though my wife and I have lived in Monroeville for about 9 years now. I decided to get a little more active and involved, and I've actually served on the Achievement Gap Committee. I don't proclaim to be an academic scholar, but I will say that after meeting, that this is a very multifaceted and complicated issue, and I'm clearly here to support everything else that everyone has said. And as I sat here, the only analogy I can think of that you all as board of directors, it's almost as if you're gardeners, and this is your garden, and you've planted the soil, you've had the sun, you've put the fertilizer, and you've been watering, and you've been watching these flowers grow. But year after year, every tulip isn't blossoming. And you saw that this was a problem, and you said, wait, what can we do? And you put this committee together, and the best horticulturists, and they came out and they said, look, there's this additive that if you put it in with the fertilizer, those other tulips can bloom. And that's what I view this full-time equity director position as. And I apologize that I was unable to make the other meeting, but if we've given you that secret sauce that we think can have all our flowers bloom, why has things changed? Now, my wife is 6 months pregnant right now, and we're doing great. I'm a scholar. I make a decent amount of money. So I implore you to make the right decision, because we'll have decisions to make on our own in 3 years. Thank you for your time.
Jamie White. Anybody else that would like to speak on the equity director?
Good evening. My name is Patricia Howe. I live on Firethorn Drive. Most people know me by Lynn. As a resident of Monroeville, as a taxpayer of Monroeville, as a past parent of Monroeville, as a school district employee of Gateway, I seriously urge you to reconsider the hiring of a part-time equity director. This is not a part-time job. This is not a part-time problem. It's a full-time problem. It's a full-time job. So I am asking you to please go back into executive session, rethink the decision of offering this position to a part-time person, and hire a full-time person. Thank you.
Terry Williams, Monroeville, Edgemead. You guys said it all. I don't need to say anything else. And I know that you all will make the right decisions. We will continue to tell how great we are. I know that we will. In spite of it all, it's a couple bruises, but we're going to make the right decisions. If we don't, I ask, if you guys don't employ someone who has a 5-year contract with the credentials to be your equity director, I still would like for us to convene the equity, the Achievement Gap Committee, and I also ask that we convene a community watch that will work with you all to make better decisions for our future. We need it.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to address the board on equity director?
My name is Devontae Butler, 24 years old. I went to Gateway. And I don't know what all is going on, to be honest. but I know a little bit about perspective. When I hear the term achievement gap, I was a young man that I pretty much failed because my mindset and my level of focus wasn't always in the best place. I've always had other things going on outside of school that always I felt was a hindrance of the setting when I was in school. I graduated with a 1.8 GPA. I had to go to CCAC. And I went to CCAC, and I pretty much failed there for the first 2 years. And I have 3 little brothers who are currently in the Gateway School District. And as I'm trying to play a big brother role, my little brother, who was 12 years old at the time, his name was Darius Harper, I asked him where his homework was at, and he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not even in school, so don't tell me to do my homework." And that motivated me to a level of extent that I didn't even know what was in me. And I re-registered back into college. And now my mindset has changed, and I have a 3.5 GPA. I just got accepted to the University of Pittsburgh and transfer and Cal U and to further my education. The reason I'm saying what I'm saying is because I didn't understand how powerful influence was. And when you just have somebody who's by your side who just genuinely cares for you as a person. And I'm looking at you guys here, and I'm just looking at myself in the back, and I just know I'm the youngest here, and I'm just saying, wow, I'm just privileged, and it's just an honor to be in this meeting. And I just feel like, from what I've heard, from what everybody said, is that if you have the ability and the power and the authority to make an impact in somebody else's life, take it. See, what I've known is that sometimes it's just a seed that is planted, and there's somebody else's job who is meant to water the seed. And I just believe that right now, I view you guys as a seed. And I feel as though there's somebody else who's meant to water the seed. And that by you guys just making a powerful decision, the outcome from now and this point, it's been 6 years since I've been in high school. And if you want to see another young man like myself come back, because I'm shaking right now because I just never envisioned myself being this type of person to even come to a school board meeting and do what I'm doing. But I'm just liberated, I'm passionate, and it's all because somebody took the time out to say, hey, I care for you. So that's it.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Buena Smith Dudley. I know that you all know me. Quite honestly, I'm thinking, how do I follow that? He said it all. He said I wasn't focused. Now, he admitted that there were many things going on in his life. There are many things going on in most students' life. But we can't say that is the reason why they can't achieve. It's still our job as educators. And you all know I was an educator 25 years and came through Gateway schools. It's our job to grab them, get their attention, and get them on a road to success. So I can't focus. Then he talked about influence. And he said, I didn't realize how important it is to be influenced. I didn't realize I was being influenced. I didn't realize I needed to be influenced by people who care. Now, I stand here not to say the Gateway teachers don't care. I know that most of them do. But it makes a difference when you can see someone who looks like you. People don't believe me when I say to them, I never in my life had a black teacher. Something's wrong with that. Until I went to college. Why is something wrong with that? Because I can't see myself. I can't see what I can become. Are you getting this? Okay. So what am I saying? Yes, we need an equity director, but we also need equity in our hiring. We need equity in our curriculum. We need equity in the training, cultural awareness training, so that our teachers who care will be equipped to walk that out in ways that are meaningful and effective for our children. And then here's the point, because I've sat in many of these meetings, and I know that most of you see this problem, you want to address this problem, but if we don't do this effectively, if we simply say, here's the label, here's the consultant, here's the something to satisfy the cry that's coming forth, then we have actually set it up for failure. And the truth of the matter is, it can't continue to fail. This is not a problem that's going to just continue without it being abated in some way. You have to do something. You have to do something effectively, and you know that means it costs and it takes the effort to say we will get the best. We will get that person who is highly trained and full-time, because we care about every child, and because it will be effective not just for students of color, but for every child. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robin Mungo, 1230 Harvest Drive. I'll give her a minute. You ready? Ready? Okay. My son graduated last year. I actually grew up in Garden City, went to Gateway, went to Garden City Elementary School, graduated in 1987. Started a career in public service. Most of you probably know me and what I do. My son didn't need a social worker. I'm very active and involved in my children's lives. My son had some issues. Thanks to April, she brought it to my attention of something that she was doing, starting the RAMP program. I took advantage of that. I took my son to a private home every Tuesday and Thursday night to get the help that he needed. He'll be starting college at the Pittsburgh Technical College, going for CAD next month. So, is there an issue? There definitely is an issue, but you can't expect for the families to know what's going on when you have families that aren't aware of everything that's happening, because maybe they have to work. Maybe both parents are working. So if you have someone who is a full-time equity director, they can address those issues. So it's not parents getting a note because their kid is maybe misbehaving because they can't pay attention, they can't keep up. There's obviously a problem that needs to be addressed. It takes a village. Our children are looking at you. I'm looking at you. I'm coming to the next meeting, and the meeting after that, and the meeting after that, because I need to get involved, and I need to educate my children to be involved. You are the role models. You have to do the right thing. Don't set anyone up for failure part-time. What can they accomplish? And if they don't accomplish, then you'll say, well, we tried. But you didn't. Part-time is not going to help the situation. Thank you.
I was just hoping that we could really take a lesson from a decision that you all made not too long ago. You looked at a full-time position that someone had, a social worker, who quit because it was too much. It was too much of a job for one person. And you said, we need a second full-time social worker because she can't do the job needed for two people. This is a full-time problem. We don't want someone who's going to come part-time and say, I quit because I cannot do the job of a full-time person. please consider taking a lesson from the decision that you made not too long ago and say, we need a full-time person. I'm also hoping that that full-time person would also come with the idea that this is not simply something that you'll do in just 2 buildings. It's a full-time problem in our entire district. Please reconsider.
Good evening. Dr. Tony Mitchell, 105 Bradbury Drive, Monroeville. I have 33 years in education, have done cultural competency training throughout Western PA. For the past 10 years, I have served on the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission conciliation agreement with the Pittsburgh Public Schools. As you all know, there is a full-time equity officer. I stand here today with a lot of concerns as a professor of African and African American studies, and I want to share them with you as I look at you, because I don't look at diversity. What I look at is the problem. But I want to be very specific in what I say so that if I get quoted, I'll know I said it. Structural inequities and inequalities are quite evident, meaning that when I look at you, this issue may be beyond the racial and cultural lens that's needed to really understand why this community has come out here tonight. Very serious problem. I'm also observing a lack of transparency in this district, specifically your decision-making. I think many of the speakers have eloquently pointed that out. Major problem, because it's a professional issue and it's also a competency issue. Are you educators or are you politicians? You may be both. Third, really a concern, major concern. Are you fully committed to addressing the complexities of race, culture, and class, specifically as it relates to the complexities? I think that's what the young man spoke so eloquently about to you. Did you really understand what he felt and what he experienced every single day in your buildings? That's what the good Reverend spoke about. She never had a teacher that looked like her. This is what a full-time equity officer does. He or she pays attention. And lastly, this is a very serious problem for me because I've written many articles on educating African American males. I am very concerned that some of the dialogue fosters stereotype threats and deficit thinking about black people. And this is a very serious issue that not only the board has to confront, but this community has to confront. These are all reasons why I strongly encourage you to change your position, but more importantly, I encourage you to change your attitude about the need for a position that is equity for all, specifically the need of white students and white people in this community to become more aware of the rich history and the contributions of African Americans to education and to this nation. Thank you.
Please state your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Michael Quigley. I am a concerned citizen. I'm not necessarily a community stakeholder because I don't necessarily live in Plum. I'm sorry, I live in Monroeville, but I have worked with the Gateway School District in Ramp and in other capacities. And I guess I'm concerned that there is a lack of connection to the work that's already been done in this district. I understand that an equity audit was done of your policies and procedures by a colleague of mine, Dr. Gretchen Jenneret. And I know that many of the recommendations that have been made from the folks here were in those same recommendations in that report that was provided to you. And so I think that there are some strategies in place that you guys can call upon in addition to the strong voice of concern that you hear from the community. And so when you think about the idea of bringing on an equity professional, I think that it would provide this district, being one of the most multicultural and diverse districts in Pennsylvania, let alone southwestern Pennsylvania, with the impetus and all of the strength and strategies necessary in order to move you guys forward to be, the first class kind of district that you can be.
Anybody else wish to speak on the equity director? Is Lisa Svidron here? Svidron? Okay.
Mr. President, at this time, I would like to make a motion for executive session.
Motion and a second. Purpose for
Personnel.
executive, personnel. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we are back from executive. Continuing on with the meeting. Mr. Schott, Section B.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Section B, which will consist of the list of bills for the month of September 2017 and the monthly financial statements for the month of August 2017, are still in the process of being completed and will be presented at the Tuesday, September 19th, 2017 regular board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Section D, personnel agenda. Ms. Crump.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We have two separate agendas for this evening. One is an action item agenda on Section D. Resolved that the Gateway Board of School Directors accepts and approves the personnel items. Agenda 1 is listed in Section D for the study session meeting. Under number 1 for employment, we're recommending the approval of the appointment of Dr. Philip Woods to perform the duties of the District Equity Coordinator for a term of 2 years through June 30th, 2019, at a salary of $30,000 subject to the terms and conditions of employment. Section B, we are also asking for Jeffrey Sheldon to be approved as a school police so we can get him started immediately. And we do have 9 names listed for special education aides at the rate of $14.81 or $15.31. At this point, we've not been able to meet with them to determine which they're going to be, whether they're going to be autistic or special education aides. So once we finish that tomorrow, we contact them and tell them they're approved. We can give you an updated list exactly of who's going to be what and the total amount.
Make a motion to approve B and C.
Second. Questions, comments on B and C?
Just a point of order, that doesn't preclude a vote on item A, correct? No, not yet. Okay.
Mrs. Crump, can I just ask you to explain why, I know why, but for audience, why we're hiring so many more special ed aides?
During the last school year, we had over 14 special education and autistic aides either retire or terminate their employment. We needed to wait until we got the IEPs ready for this year to determine our need. And we do have several students who have gone into the district that are new this year that also need additional assistance.
Any other questions or comments on B and C? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Barney?
Mrs. Cerrucci. Mr. Lapsevich.
Aye.
Mr. Nola.
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Aye.
Mr. Ritter.
Aye.
Mr. Stubenbort.
Aye.
Mrs. Warning. Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mrs. Byrne.
Aye. Thank you.
Okay, I'll move the, Mr. President, I'll move the item number A, the equity coordinator.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second on the coordinator. Questions or comments?
I have several. Back in June, the board voted 7-2 to search for an interview for a full-time equity director. I was wondering at what point in time we decided to interview for a part-time, and if we had resubmitted that job description to PDE to see if a principal certification was necessary or not.
As to the job description, it is the same job description. We just changed the title based on the board's recommendation. So the job description is still as approved by PDE. The current job description as it is requires a principal certification.
Okay. And so this leads me to several other questions. If we change the title of a teacher to a janitor, do they have the same job duties? We approved a equity director for full-time to search for it. On a sheet of paper that has a contract on it, it says District Equity Coordinator. On the motion that was approved at the last meeting, it was a equity consultant. So I do believe we are talking about 3 separate job duties. I believe that there is a huge difference between a director, a consultant, and a coordinator. With that being said, I would ask if we are going to go down this route, which I surely hope we do not, as I believe the district needs a full-time equity director. I think this needs to be submitted to PDE to see if principal paper is needed. With it being someone part-time that's actually not even on district grounds during district hours, I believe that's something that may not need a principal's certification, and we may be able to have other candidates out there. So I believe the district has options out there. If this is the route they choose to go, again, I'm not in support of it, but if it is, I believe we should look for the most qualified candidate.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have, Mr. President. I want to amend us getting a full-time equity director.
Okay, so what I understand is, when you say you want to amend, that would mean you're making a motion to amend Mr. O'Donnell's motion to hire the part-time equity director. You're saying you want a full-time?
Yes.
I second the amendment.
Okay. Now, the amendment gets voted upon first, so there's discussion on the amendment.
Wait a minute. I thought there was a 7-day requirement for motions from the board on the floor.
There is, which can be overridden with a supermajority.
So I'm asking,
So the vote on the...
When we vote, we'll see if there's a...
So the vote right now is
on whether or not to vote on
whether or
the
not to
amendment.
accept the amendment. Does everybody understand what we're voting on? Is
It's
there
on
discussion?
It's just on the supermajority to vote on the amendment. We're not voting on the amendment, only is there a supermajority
To accept the
consider
motion.
George's motion to make it a full-time position. There certainly can be discussion, it's a marathon.
You want to discuss? Neil, go ahead.
I'd like to just say one thing, I think. Okay. Here's the thing, and it has nothing to do with anybody personally or anything, even the position, but here's the way I look at this. We have teachers and students in our buildings this time of the day, whatever time that is, whatever time it starts and it ends. We're looking to hire somebody that is going to be here literally zero amount of the time that the students and the teachers are here. Zero amount of the time. Because he has a job where he has to do that at the place where he's at. Like, the guy, this guy or any other person that we hire may be the greatest person ever. Like, ever. But it requires some interaction with those people during those hours, with them during that time frames, and I just don't see that that's their right path to take. That's just that's the difference between part-time and full-time.
I'd like to comment on that. Something that we need to keep in mind is that in the pilot program, which was recommended by the committee, we're only talking about 63 kids. 63 kids who score below the acceptable line, basic or below basic. If you were to extend that to the other two schools and just assume that you had another 60, which you may or may not, it doesn't warrant a full-time position. And had it been a warranted issue, the committee would have made that recommendation, but it didn't. So right now, the motion on the table to hire this man is to fulfill the motion that passed 2 weeks ago, and it's to serve 63 kids. Secondly, he's going to be here on grounds a number of the days, because I think Bill discussed that with him. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong? That is correct. Okay, so he will be here on grounds, interacting with the teachers, interacting with the students. We also have the social work component.
But I believe that it's not the 63 students. I just listened to, I could count them, but 20-some people stand up there and say, it's equity for all, not equity for 63 students. It's equity for all of our students. We have 3,400 students. We don't have 63 students.
Thank you.
Correct. I have one question and one statement, and Neil, I completely agree with you. So we discussed the school performance profile up at the high school, and we said we have 100% as far as closing the achievement gap, right? First and foremost, the school performance profile has been around for 2 years, and they're actually getting rid of it next year. So let's look at the results with a grain of salt. University Park, ELA literature, 0% in closing the achievement gap. Ramsey, ELA literature, 0%. Science biology, 0%. Evergreen, ELA literature, 35%. Cleveland Stewart Elementary, 100% in all areas. That's one that we picked as a pilot school, mind you. Mosside Middle School, 0% in math, 0% in ELA lit. Gateway Middle School, 0% in ELA and lit. It is much more than 63 students. We need to look at all data, not just the high school's school performance profile. The next question I have is, we interviewed for a full-time position. Correct me if I'm wrong, the candidate whose name is listed applied for the full-time position. Is that accurate, Mr. Short?
That is correct.
Is he willing to take a full-time position?
We have not offered a full-time position to him.
So we interviewed for a full-time position, and this is where I get confused, and this is where the transparency issue, I think, resonates with a lot of those in attendance this evening. We voted 7-2 to interview for a full-time position, and we found out an hour before the last board meeting in executive session that we were being offered a part-time position. So if the individual applied for a full-time position, I wouldn't apply for a job if I didn't want the job. So if we interviewed for a full-time position, and he's willing to take the full-time position, give him the full-time position.
So for the sake of transparency, I would like to know how the part-time position came about. Mrs. Crump.
I'll let Mr. Short answer that. So.
Okay, thank you.
During the interview process, or I should say the screening of the interviews, we received a number of applicants from which the administrative team sat down, reviewed all the applications, specifically looked at the criteria associated with the job description that was submitted to PDE. At that point in time, with the director position, it required a principal certification. 6 applicants were brought in. At no time during this process did we know of the race of each one of the 6 individuals. It just so happens, and it was reported, I believe, in the newspaper, that we did have 3 Caucasian and 3 African Americans interview for the position. During the interview of one of the candidates that is on the agenda tonight, the question came up about the opportunity to work as a consultant for the district. At that point in time, we took that under consideration. During the executive session, we brought that information forward.
So the candidate himself suggested the part-time position?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, so back to the original, what's being voted on now, and let's pay attention to this. You're voting on whether or not you're going to permit George to make the motion to amend it to become full-time. Because of the resolution you passed about board policy now is that you've got to put something on the agenda for at least 7 days, unless a supermajority votes otherwise. So that's the vote you're taking right now, to whether or not to have George's amendment considered.
Is that true if we are just changing something that's on there?
Yeah, you're changing what's being, what's on this.
Just For clarification, if it is actually on the agenda under board member resolutions, can George simply amend it to say that verbiage, which was advertised 7 days prior?
You mean the full-time?
Correct. Yeah, there isn't actually the achievement, it's called the Actual Achievement Gap Committee's recommendation under board member resolutions. Can he make the motion just to vote on that? Or amend to follow that language?
Well, that's not what's on this agenda. I mean,
No,
what's,
it's in here, under board member resolutions, page 1 of 2,
He's saying it's
section G.
He's saying that comes later. He's saying right now on the agenda, we're on section 1.
yeah, let me go to the back.
Bruce?
Yeah.
Right now, I believe that in order to change the action item here, we need a supermajority on this vote. If that supermajority is here, then that would be changed to full. If it's not, it would be left alone.
And he's going to decide.
Okay. Okay, there's an action, or there's an item on here, board member resolutions, whereas Gateway School District Administration has advertised and begun interviewing for full-time equity director as directed by the school board by a 7-2 vote. And then it goes on. Well, you have that on the agenda. You're right. You do have a matter that is on the agenda that has been advertised for 7 days, which requires the action on a full-time equity director. So I think then there is no 7-day rule applying there.
Correct, so we're just voting on the amendment.
So you're just voting on the original amendment that, well, no, you're voting on George's amendment.
Correct.
George has made the motion, and there's been a second by Chad, to make this position a full-time, consistent with this resolution that we have at the end of the agenda.
With the position and the person.
So what we're voting on is George
George's
is making
proposed.
this a full-time appointment for Dr. Philip Woods. Is that
He hasn't put a name in it.
No, this is just for the
just for the position. Everybody follow? This is just to make this a full-time position.
Does this require a supermajority?
I don't believe that happens now, Steve, with that resolution at the end.
It's already on the agenda.
Okay, you have an action item on, and then you have a subsequent resolution.
But it's on the agenda.
It is on, it was properly advertised, but they're two separate issues.
I agree, but the language is there.
My point is that.
Point of order, can we call the
we have
question?
Please, we have a motion and a second on the floor for item A. If item A is defeated, then we're gonna move to that, later on in the agenda, we're gonna move to the resolution that was presented in a timely fashion. That's all there is to it.
That would have been the case had George not made the motion to amend it. But he made the motion.
So what's he amending? Is he amending the action item?
Yes.
And you're
He's
saying-
amending A.
Okay, and that requires a supermajority.
I don't believe it does, because you have the matter on the agenda. It's a notice thing. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not anything more than notice.
So we advertise.
All right, so.
Denise, I also have a question about this. There are 3 bullet points. We talked about one of those bullet points on page 2 of 2 of the action items and board resolutions. What about items 2 and 3? Are they somehow
The amendment,
subsumed with George's proposal to bring in item number 1, first 2 and 3?
Keep going.
Why
Keep
don't we
going.
just vote the first item one way or the other?
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, let's not.
Keep going.
If it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
For clarification for the minutes, this will not be, this person is not being hired full-time. This is,
The amendment is for the position to become a full-time equity director, not the individual.
Let me take up John's question. 1, 2, and 3 will be taken up when you vote on this at the end.
Thank you.
So it's back to George's motion to make this a full-time position with no name. Okay.
Everybody on board?
Sure.
We have roll call, Barney.
Mr. Lapsevich.
Yes.
Mr. Nola.
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell.
No.
Mr. Ritter.
No.
Mr. Stubenbort.
Aye.
Mrs. Warning. Mr. Williams.
No.
Mrs. Byrne.
Aye.
Mrs. Cerrucci.
No.
Motion fails.
Now we're back to the original motion that Mr. O'Donnell had made, appears on the agenda under 1A, under the personnel action agenda.
Due to the fact that we had 30 individuals come out and speak this evening in support of a full-time equity director, I believe the board needs more time to evaluate, and I make a motion to table said motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote.
This is to table.
Right.
Table.
Mr. Nola.
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell. Mr. Ritter.
Aye.
Mr. Stubenbort.
Aye.
Mrs. Warning. Mr. Williams.
No.
Mrs. Byrne.
No.
Mrs. Cerrucci.
No.
Mr. Lapsevich.
Motion carries.
Motion fails.
Fails 5-4.
Fails.
So we're back to the original vote
Right.
on item A.
Correct.
It's been moved and seconded.
Correct. It's now time for a vote.
Yes.
Vote number A, yes.
Number A.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Mr. O'Donnell. Mr. Ritter.
Aye.
Mr. Stubenbort.
No.
Mrs. Warning. Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mrs. Byrne.
Aye.
Mrs. Cerrucci.
Aye.
Mr. Lapsevich. Mr. Nola.
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Section D, Trish.
Now we'll continue to Section D for next week. We do have one resignation listed. There are 7 leave of absences. Transfers are based on the collective bargaining agreements. We have an employment recommended for a substitute food service worker. We are also asking for a rescinding of the resignation letter of Brandy Reynolds, a staff nurse at Evergreen Elementary. For next board meeting, we will be recognizing and recording the records of the board that in accordance with Pennsylvania Status Title 24, Section 1108 of the Pennsylvania School Code, the following temporary professional employees have acquired tenure. For those that are new to the board, that means that they have had 3 consecutive years of satisfactory evaluations. That will be Madison Castanero, Andrew Estock, Kara Sampson, Michelle Major, and Erica Detman. Under 7, we have a listing of supplemental contracts. We do have a few that we probably will be adding on, and we'll notify you as soon as we get those recommendations from the athletic department. And under 8, we have 4 volunteers listed.
Questions, comments, Mr. O'Donnell?
On the resignation, this has probably been asked and answered before. Do we do an exit interview on these folks to gather while?
The question was, did we
Do we do an exit interview?
We do an exit interview. This individual accepted another position at another district, worked there for 2 days, and wanted to return to home, to Gateway.
Okay, so aggregate the data that comes off of that and then supply it to the consistency. Okay.
Yes.
That's all.
Any other questions or comments? No, board, this is board.
No, nothing. No, nothing happened. They just approved a part-time director. I assume. We may have a full and a part-time.
Okay, Section F, administrative resolutions.
What are my thoughts here?
Administrative resolution is short.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We have a few policies that have been on display for the 30 days. I'm going to defer to Dr. Rossi if he could take item number 1, item number 2, and then Mrs. Bungard, item number 3. Mrs. Bungard. And item number 4, Title I funds, Dr. Rossi. Item number 5, Mr. Schott.
Mr. Short. It be seeking acceptance, approval, and adoption of the management comments and corrective action plan contained in the management reply form and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Auditor General Performance Audit Report for the period July 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2015, and as depicted in Exhibit B.
Item number 6.
Item number 6 is the annual approval of the school bus drivers and monitors for the 17-18 fiscal year, and that list is depicted in Exhibit C.
And item number 7, Dr. Rossi.
Approval of Title 4 Part A for the federal program through the school academic curriculum grant federal funds, preliminary allocation for section 18.
Questions or comments on section F?
I have a question. Freshman members, as we discussed the settlement agreement, item number 3 in executive, how long ago?
June.
And that number was presented at
That is correct.
Any other questions or comments? Moving on to resolutions presented by board members.
This is on revised food policy 808 for final approval this evening. Food service that has been placed on a 30-day public display beginning August 1st, 2017. Additional language is added the August 15th meeting. The complete revised policy is depicted in Exhibit A. Do you want it all read? Do you want it all read?
It's up to you.
Fine.
You can just read the top.
I read it. I did.
Do we need a second? Do we have a second?
No, we're not voting.
We're not voting because it hasn't reached the 30-day.
Isn't this an action item?
Yes.
It's a board resolution.
It's a board resolution.
Yes.
I'm asking,
Ordinarily, you'd wait till the regular meeting.
And it's met the qualification of 30 days.
If it has met, then it's
Yes, it's been met 30 days. Come on, September, August 1st.
So she's looking for a second. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Questions, comments?
Sure. At the previous meeting, I asked for the public to provide input on this, and I only got one person to respond to that. The person responded saying that there are more important things that the district needs, that the board needs to concentrate on, and that they were not in favor of this tightened window. It would cause us to have to throw out, to get rid of food. So that they were in favor of the longer protocol, 3-year protocol, and not this tightened one down to 1 year or 6 months, but in any event, that the board should move on.
And
Any other questions or comments?
I just want to follow up John's comment. Previously, we had discussed this at length, so I'm not going to really spend too much time on it. I believe the board as a whole received 12 emails, all mostly from food service workers, all mostly against the policy. I just want to make the public clear, because we've gone through this again and again and again, so I'm not going to, again, keep dwelling on it, but this is not recommended by administration. This is not recommended by our food service workers. This is not recommended by our business manager. This is not recommended by anyone that works in the food department. No data, absolutely no data has been provided when asked on multiple occasions that this is the best way to go, yet tons of data has been shown on the other side saying that this is an asinine policy, and that ends my comments.
All right, to follow up, I left one rhetorical question hanging in the air. That is, if it turns out that this is a foolish policy, shouldn't the board be held financially accountable? Everyone choked on that, and I said I hated to bring that forward. After thinking about that a little bit further, I thought that the board is not the one who's going to be financially accountable if we have to throw out good food. People who will be held financially accountable will be the citizens. We will throw out perfectly good food and be charged more for it because essentially we won't be on the program where
We won't be able to buy
The commodities.
cheaper.
at the commodity, the reduced commodity price, and so we'll have to pay for it at a higher price. Right. And so the board will be held accountable to pay this as a fiduciary responsibility that the citizens will. So that's my final thought on this.
Can I interrupt
I
you
am a
real quick?
citizen, too.
Can I interrupt? We're not throwing anything out with the implement of the fourth point that I said, that we would keep all the food that was 3 years and under. What we're looking at is for our food director to purchase what he is going to be using on a year-to-year basis. There's no guarantee what he is ordering that he will be getting it in that year. So this is just going to make sure that the food is going to be used when he orders it and what he's ordering for.
I have a comment. Am I interrupting?
No, I'm finished.
Okay. Because we have a lot of public here, first of all, there's no prohibition about going onto the commodities market and purchasing on an annual basis, number one. Number two, when the evaluations were done of the food service department, please keep in mind that we found 5-year-old food frozen, and many members of this board felt that that's not right. And finally, this is a very simple issue. The issue is, do we want to serve the children in this district fresher food? And that's what it boils down to. All of the rest of this is, I hate to use this word, baloney.
I'll simply follow up just because we do have members of the press here. The food that was found, there was a problem with the rotation of the food, and that individual was disciplined, and stringent guidelines have been made to assure that that does not happen again.
That's accurate.
I'm just waiting for a
That's
vote.
accurate. Guidelines were established, and then I believe Valerie went back in and found additional violations of it. So this is, again, pretty simple. We want fresh food, and I think we ought to move to vote.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll simply end with, the county came in, did not find any violations. I just want the public to be very aware of that. A lot of our food service workers send their own children to this district. They would never serve any food that is expired, is old, is moldy, any of those allegations. I just want the public to be very clear about that.
Any other questions or comments? Bonnie, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ritter.
I'm trying to get the order sheet to see if I vote no, then the current motion stays effective. No.
Mr. Stubenbort.
No.
Mrs. Warning.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mrs. Byrne.
Aye.
Mrs. Cerrucci.
No.
Mr. Lapsevich. Mr. Nola.
No.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay.
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Ed?
I make a motion to approve number 2 under board member resolutions titled The Actual Achievement Gap Committee's Recommendation. Whereas the Gateway School District's administration has advertised and begun interviewing candidates for a full-time equity director as directed by the school board by way of 7-2 vote. Whereas the Gateway School Board views the achievement gap as a full-time problem and not as a part-time problem. And whereas the Gateway School Board wishes to honor the hard work of the Achievement Gap Committee by following through with their true recommendation as depicted in the Achievement Gap Committee proposal binder given to all board members. Now therefore be it resolved, the Gateway School Board direct the administration to implement the following. Number 1, continue its first board directive to find a qualified candidate willing to work full-time to address the achievement gap that exists within the Gateway School District by serving as a full-time equity director. Number 2, expand the efforts to all buildings as a larger gap is actually present at other schools, and it seems the previously mentioned 2 elementary schools were chosen at random. Number 3, show the community that the Gateway School Board has identified an academic problem within the district, and after forming an ad hoc committee, is willing to commit the appropriate resources necessary to address such a problem by way of hiring a full-time equity director.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Can we have a roll call, please, Bonnie?
Mr. Stubenborg,
Yes.
Mrs. Warning, Mr. Williams,
No.
Mrs. Byrne, Mrs. Cerrucci, Mr. Lapsevich,
Yes.
Mr. Nola,
Aye.
Mr. O'Donnell, Mr. Ritter.
No.
Motion fails. Motion fails.
Motion fails. Start with, let me start with you. Mr. Short, Administrative Superintendent's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. To the audience members, everyone that had an opportunity to speak tonight, I wish to thank them for their passion and determination in I would like to, at this time, just acknowledge Dr. Philip Woods, who's been patiently waiting over there. Dr. Woods is the current principal at West Mifflin Area High School, has a strong equity and culturally responsive background. We've interviewed Dr. Woods. He is on board 100% with the goal. He's had an opportunity during the time leading up to this meeting to not only examine some data, but also look at curriculum and also policies within the district. So he is excited to be on board. He will be working under the leadership of Dr. Chakey, Dr. Rossi, and myself. And I can assure you that we are 100% committed to working for all children within the Gateway School District. And we will continue to raise our scores to the level that the recent awards we have won, including the U.S. News World Report rankings, the top 10 in Allegheny County, the Niche.com award as an overall A within the Gateway School District. So I'm excited to have Dr. Woods on hand, and you will soon see him out and about within the buildings, working with our children to ensure all their needs are met. So thank you, Dr. Woods.
Dr. Chakey, anything this evening? Dr. Rossi? Some word? Thank you. Ms. Crump?
Nothing at this time.
Schott?
Nothing further, thank you.
Mr. Dice?
Yes. I have here tonight the completed, well, not executed, but completed application for the rezoning. Pass out a short form for each of you to have. I have a long form. We'll be discussing it with Mr. Superintendent Short, getting his signature and moving forward with this application to the municipality. I would suggest to you that one thing that comes out rather quickly is there's a fee of about $3,800 due to process this application. You may want to reach out to the municipality and find out if they'd be interested in possibly waiving the fee, given the fact that the monies that you pay out are coming from the same taxpayers as they. In any event, the estimated cost of the application is about $3,800. I'll leave it to you to decide how you want to deal with the fee to be paid, and it should be, in order to process this, you have to pay the fee or get a waiver from them.
Can I add a comment?
Sure. Everybody get a copy?
I agree. Pretty much. This is the third step in keeping the board apprised
Right.
of this process. The first was to conduct a survey. The survey was done. We understand what it is we own, what we don't own. The second part of that dovetails with the title search. That really goes to mineral rights and things of that sort. So this is the third step to ask if we rezone for commercial 2.
Correct.
And it's the judgment of everybody involved so far that would dramatically enhance, now let me just say, enhance the value of the property. There's no doubt from anybody's point of view that we discussed with them. So just as a matter of procedure, if we authorize this step forward, the next step would be, I believe, 2 or 3 of us will appear in front of the planning committee, and we'll explain to the planning committee what we intend to do, why we intend to do it, so on and so forth. That's it.
Anything else? Any other questions or comments?
Let me ask this, if we already agree what was going to be voted on, so this will be an action item in the administration. We pay the dollars, we can't get it waived, right?
That's what we'll need the fee to be.
Okay. So is it okay if we just ask Bill to contact municipalities?
Mr. Little?
Yes, I actually made a note that I would contact Mr. Little and also Mr. Hugus concerning this.
So we would know at the time we vote. So that we would know at the time we vote if we were paying 38 plus or not.
Which we should know by our next meeting.
Okay, yeah.
2 weeks, yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
That's all I have.
Thank you, Bruce. Mr. Brown, do you have anything for us this evening? Thank you. Start with board reports. We'll start with George. Thank you. Steve? Stephanie?
Yes, I would like to speak to the equity director position vote. So I did vote for a full-time equity director search, and then I voted this evening to hire Mr. Woods as a full-time equity director, and it failed, and then I voted for the part-time equity director. So I would just like to talk a little bit too about how I understand the process worked. To my best knowledge, the school district did do a search. They felt that Mr. Woods was the best, most qualified candidate, and Mr. Woods offered it to be a part-time position. Now, I can't personally investigate and determine exactly what happened, but that's what was told to me by administration. Furthermore, I think that we have to look at this as a win as well. We have now tutoring for all students in need in elementary schools, along with transportation. We have a social worker added on. We have a part-time equity coordinator, and I certainly understand the residents' concern that this needs to be a full-time position. However, I think we also have to think about the positive aspect as well, that we at least now have a part-time coordinator position, and administration feels that he's very qualified. They're excited to have him on board. I certainly welcome him and wish him the best. I'm sure he's going to be a great addition. And, you know, to that end, I'm sorry if you're disappointed, but I truly feel as though this is a win for all children in the district. Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to, I forgot to mention something. May I, please?
Yes.
I'd like to say that I was a chairman of the Achievement Gap Committee. And this started when I went to Mr. and Mrs. Houston's home and I was campaigning for this board position. And they talked about the gap in achievement. And I said that were I to be elected to the school board, I would then advocate for the establishment of a committee and the development of a set of resolutions to address that. I know these are tough decisions, and I know these are difficult and emotional issues. I know it fully. I was talking with Mrs. Howard at the break, and you know, told her that you know, that this was a year and a half of difficult discussions, but we have and we are making progress. And if we find at the end of the line that this doesn't work, everything that's been discussed tonight can be put back on the table and reconsidered. And the other thing is I'd just like to thank the people that came and spoke tonight for the respectful way they did it. I think we all appreciate that. Thanks, that's it. I'm sorry I didn't have that.
Chad?
Several items. First and foremost, I just want to send, I believe on behalf of the entire district, our thoughts and prayers to those affected in Houston. Just to talk a little bit about how awesome our student body is here at Gateway. Student Government Association is actually raising money for another Gateway Gator school district down in Houston, and they'll be donating all the money. Their school is completely flooded. So SGA, they never cease to amaze any of us up here. They're always dedicated and willing to be good servants and to really work for what we want them to work for. So thank you to everyone, all the teachers involved, but especially the students for taking upon themselves to raise money for those in need all the way down in Houston. She spoke this evening. She had already left, but I wanted to thank Brittany Smith, who came up and spoke in support of the equity director. She is the one who founded Gators Give Back, and they sponsored another, I believe, 6 or 7 students that needed backpacks and school belongings. They are a nonprofit organization. If anyone wants any additional information, I know the Trib ran a story on her and the organization last year. Please let us know. Teachers and parents and other individuals within the district are able to bring up any kids' needs, whether it be clothing, whether it be school materials, to her. So thank you again to her for her great work there. The equity director, I'm not going to spend much time. We've obviously spent a lot of time on this. I'm upset with how it went. I wish Dr. Woods nothing but the best, obviously. I really hope that improvement is seen, and I really hope that the board then can decide that we do need this full-time. Even with a part-time consultant, I ask all board members to contemplate the idea of at least expanding it to all K-4 buildings. There's no reason that we should only offer it to 2 schools, especially when 2 other schools are shown to have a larger achievement gap. So if you guys would kindly consider the possibility of at least opening it up to all elementary schools, I believe that would be beneficial and would enhance the program that's already at hand. September 18th at 6:30 at the Gateway High School. So now we can officially advertise this. I was waiting for an email from Mark Rubino from Forbes. So everyone is on board. We're doing a human trafficking and internet safety and social media safety. We have Robin in attendance. I want to again thank the Pennsylvania State Police for doing the internet safety and the social media safety portion. And I want to thank Mark Rubino, who's the president over at Forbes Regional Hospital, for coming and doing the human trafficking portion. It will start at 6:30, again at the Gateway High School auditorium, September 18th. There will be 1 hour dedicated to human trafficking and then another hour dedicated to safe internet use. This program is intended for teachers and parents of the Gateway School District. This is not intended for children, as there are some very sensitive, there is very sensitive material that is going to be covered. With that being said, I want to thank Tracy Riccardi, our home ec teacher, who is actually having students from the high school and also Girl Scouts to actually offer free babysitting. So if you can't come unless you have to bring your children, you're able to do that, and babysitting for all ages will be offered in the dance studio. So hopefully a lot of you guys from the community can come out to that event. The next thing, and I believe my last thing, Val, did you ever reach out to the municipality in order to set up a intergovernmental meeting?
Yes, I did, Chad. I talked to Mr. Griesbach. He said at this time there's nothing to alert the public on, and when their time comes, he will get in touch with me to set up the meeting. Very good. If you could reach out to him again. So what I had asked last meeting was to address the stormwater maintenance fee. I've talked to council about it. I've talked to the school board a little bit about it as we were presented information. Mr. Shaw emailed me. Let me just bring up the number. About $74,000 for the district out of the $2.5 million total collected. The reason I'm bringing it up again is the comprehensive annual financial report was just published on the municipal's website, and Goal 505 states, let me just read it verbatim, continue to evaluate the municipal separate stormwater sewer system program as it relates to the implementation of a flat fee for all property owners to repair an aging storm sewer system infrastructure. So this is continuing to pop up. I just want to make sure, I think we've gotten the runaround. I want to see what the effects, not only to the district, but to all stakeholders will have, as that will affect the district in many ways. So if you can, since that document was just published last week, reach out again. I would appreciate it. I will do that.
I think that great job to all the students and to the football team. 2 big wins. It's always fun to see the stands full. Honestly, we didn't even see that last year, so it was great to see the community as a whole. The student section was packed, very well behaved, at least from what I saw. So thank you to everyone there. That ends my report. Thank you.
Chad, you said Dr. Rubino is on board now?
Yes, he sent notification. They were waiting on whether or not the individual was able to attend that evening and to get proper authorization through Jesse Miller, which we have. So
we're good to go.
The event is good to go September 18th, correct?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ritter.
Sure. I was really, really impressed by that young man, Levante, I think it's his name. He graduated.
Devontae Butler.
Is that right? Okay. He said he was distracted by other things while at Gateway. He had a low GPA, went to CCAC. Now he has 3.5 GPA and is transferring to the University of Pittsburgh. And then he said this, someone who's by your side who encourages someone. That's a wonderful thing. And then he said, one plants and another waters. Where did he learn that?
We should think about bringing him to talk to more students.
All right. Okay. So here I was a Saturday or two ago. I was giving all my blood. I give platelets every 56 days because, some people have leukemia or, they're dying. And so I quietly do what I can. And I looked over. There was this one young student, a high school student. I went over. I heard that she was going to Gateway. I said, hi, if I may introduce myself, I'm John Ritter. I'm on the school board there. I just wanted to tell you what a wonderful thing you're doing here, giving your blood. And I encouraged her to do that, throughout a lifetime. And I told her my story real quickly about how my mother had 11 kids, and there was a time when things weren't going right, and the baby was dying, my mom was dying, and someone had already given blood so that my mother could live, and my little brothers or sisters, whoever it was being born, they could live. And so my dad made up his mind to pay back and always give blood. My dad told me that story, and I made up my mind that I like my little brothers and sisters and my mother, so I would always give blood. And I told this young student that she was sitting there as a captive audience. This was I think her first time giving blood. So I just wanted to say, Hope, that's this young student's name, she's a 12th grader. It says right here, Hope, I have a t-shirt for you. This is about breast cancer. It says, supporting the fighters, admiring the survivors, honoring the taken, and never giving up hope. So this is from the Central Blood Bank, and the nurses want hope to have this. I invited her to come here and stand up and talk. I hope she comes next time. But I also found out that we have a program here at Gateway where the students can give blood, right? Multiple. And then they turn into this guy right here, Devontae. One plants, another waters. I mean, isn't this why we're here? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ritter. Mr. Nola?
All I have is I just want to say thanks to everybody for coming out. And I think we should have the meetings in here all the time because I like having all the people. And I encourage you all to stay engaged. Like it's not, I mean, it's good that you showed up, but you need to stay engaged. And that's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nola. Mr. Rucci?
So tonight the focus was really the full-time versus a part-time equity director. But everybody needs to remember all of the other areas in which we were all in agreement. Part of this program, this is not a one-person job. This program that has many aspects that we agree on include a district-wide policy establishing equity goals, an equity action plan that our assistant superintendent, Mr. Chakey, has already created and showed me last week, an equity team consisting of a diversity consultant and a culturally responsive teaching consultant. It includes multiple members of our staff, teachers, principals, parents. It includes implementing Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching throughout the district and a crosswalk that content with culturally responsive pedagogy. This program also includes delivering professional development for the culturally responsive pedagogy. This program also provides diversity training to all of our staff members within Cleveland, Stewart, and Evergreen elementary schools, and then additional diversity training to all teachers within the district as part of a 3-year comprehensive plan. This program, we all agree on, has an aspect to deepen emphasis on parental and community involvement to ultimately have a positive impact on student engagement and achievement. And this program offers tutoring across all of our elementary schools to any student in need. So that's 8 areas of which we all were in agreement. So I don't want us to leave here thinking that we were battling over a full-time or a part-time coordinator when we have 8 areas that we all agree on and 8 areas that we're moving forward on. So I agree with Chad, and I would support just modifying that pilot program to all K-4 schools inclusive. However, I just want everyone to keep in mind that we might have some slight disagreements on how to move forward, but everybody here is committed to moving forward. So it's a passionate issue for everybody, and I think everybody at Gateway wants all of our students to achieve. And if anybody questions that, then shame on them, because nobody is up here giving their time and their efforts for any reason than we want to make our community and our school a better place. So I hope that we can continue to move forward, get through our disagreements on how to do that. The program will evolve. We're on the right track. We've actually begun, and there aren't any schools like ours in the suburbs that are even doing a program like this. So again, Gateway is leading. Gateway continues to lead in a lot of areas, and this is another area where we're leading. And the second thing I want to say is I hope that you will give Dr. Woods a chance. You see, we all had the opportunity to meet him and talk to him and interview him for at least an hour, and he's a remarkable man. So, you might be disappointed that, he's not here full time, but the man has a very impressive resume. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this packet of recommendations and things that he received, but I'll just highlight a couple. Dr. Walt Keeley Leadership Award for his respect and support for strong parent involvement, strengthening PTA organizations and openly interacting with community, creating a quality learning environment for all children, working with the AP Pathway to Equity, which develops, expands, and increases enrollment in advanced placement courses for all students with attention given to underrepresented populations. That was something that we talked about with another member of the GAP committee is, you know, we need to look at getting more minority children in AP placement classes. And this is something that Mr. Woods has experience with, and he's going to bring a lot of value in that area. Mr. Woods has experience promoting multicultural concepts, building multicultural programs that involve parents, student teachers, administration, and administrators. He's also a member of the African American Male Mentoring Initiative founded by the Heinz Endowments. Now, there's many pages, but I'm just giving you a sampling because I want you to give this man a chance, and I want you to just be open to the resources that he has, the knowledge that he has, and the assets that he can bring to Gateway School District. And I personally look forward to working with you, Dr. Woods. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Rucci. Ms. Warning?
Yes. Make it short since Mary Beth took so long, but appreciate everything you said. First off, I just want to congratulate all the fall sports. Everybody's intact, doing well. Mr. Helchi, the band looks fantastic for all that hard work out in the blacktop, and they look great. Football team plays at Connellsville this weekend, this Friday night. I know it's a long trip, but it's worth your while to take a look at these guys if you feel like taking a drive. I know tonight with the equity director, it was a very touchy situation with everything that was going on here. I watched as people exited. Mr. Woods applied for a position, felt that he could do something here at Gateway. We should look at that it is a win-win situation. We have someone that's going to come in, work with the gaps that we have. We have a fantastic assistant superintendent, Dr. Chakey, that deals with this. I feel both of those working together, we're going to see a good turnaround here. So, Mr. Woods, welcome to, Dr. Woods, welcome to Gateway. Little issue here. I know I always get into the colors. West Mifflin, blue and gold. Got to go black and gold.
West Mifflin is blue and gold. Where I'm from, Aliquippa is red and black. I can mix. I
So
can
we have
transfer.
to, okay,
Right.
black and gold. Okay,
Right.
so if when you do come to a game or something, you have to do, all right.
I'll talk to Mr. Short and make sure I get some paraphernalia. I just want to address the board and also the community, and I do understand this is a very sensitive area. And in the interview process, we did talk about a lot of different scenarios and how we can make this work and move forward. I'm 100% committed to the lives of young adults and betterment in their elevation through society. That young man who spoke earlier, he is the very reason why I get up at 5:10 a.m. every morning, because I have to go to work and nurture a gentleman like that. And then, once again, we talk about equity. You don't want to forget the top end. You can't forget the AP kids. You can't forget the honors kids. You don't want to be a person that's only identifying and acknowledging the troubled students. You got to spread it out. So I think this is a very unique opportunity. In my doctorate and my research, it was about lowering the achievement gap between underprivileged students and students who are identified with special education. So this is, once again, my life's work. And when the position opened, it was ideal for me. So in a bit of desperation, I did offer and say, hey, if a full-time thing doesn't work, come back, let's talk about it. I don't want to say it wrong. Officer or sergeant? Trooper Mungro has been in my building. She has experienced the culture that I built in my building. I have 1,100 students. Everyone's respectful. Everyone respects each other's differences. Everyone acknowledges each other's differences. As it said in the article, you're my new spokesperson, my agent, I'm taking you on the road. Everything that I've done from the first day of my career is to help underprivileged students. Myself, growing up in the projects, I would have been labeled poverty. I grew up in a single-parent home with multiple brothers and sisters. I fought through adversity. I fought through community challenges. If you're familiar with the city of Aliquippa, there's not very many cities in this area that has more poverty and crime and distractions like the gentleman talked about. I've jumped in a couple of those potholes, but I had people, like he said, that cared, that helped me get out. And if I could do it, it could be done. So I'm excited to be a part of this team, and as she said, just give me a chance. Let's work it, let's build it, let's grow it, and let's together earn the full-time position that you want. I would love to be here full-time, but in my experience, nothing comes easy. You gotta work, you gotta earn it. So this is another step, and I'm happy to be here. And I thank Mr. Short, I thank the board, I thank Dr. Chakey. I'm excited. So just give it a chance, okay?
Thank you, Dr. Woods. And that's
And with that, I look for adjournment. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you. I heard you, Neil.